I just like to keep us on our toes and just thought I'd stop the wee intro a wee bit early there because we are miles late, so apologies. The show was scheduled for 7:30, but usually it's me who's the diva, but Jonathan just shows up when he wants, so it's pretty tricky. And
Buses don't always run on time, Russell.
Well, that is very true, mate. That's very true. And I'm just too nice a person not to ask how he's been doing behind the scenes before we start. So, you could blame the guy to the right. Anyway, nice to be back on the bus. First show in a wee while, certainly with company as well. It's the first show that I've done in a wee while. So looking forward to this one. There's a lot to get through as well. Of course, we'll be looking to take as many of your views as possible, and we can discuss as many of them as we can get through, really, in the show as well, for the next sort of hour or so that we're on. Jonathan, you're all good, yeah? Yep, I asked you backstage, so I'll take that as a yes. That's good to know.
All good, yeah. As I count my pet team, I couldn't have timed it any better.
All that good stuff means give us a like, give us a share, shave your hair. Remember as well, if you want to become a Bhoycie Bus member, £1.99 a month. The buses will be on as and when they can, so I don't feel any obligation on anyone who's paying it or anything like that. It's never been like that anyway. All the content remains free on the channel. You are helping keeping the wheels on the road. The subscription fees, for example, on this are, I think it's just between this and the audio, I think we're at about 60 quid a month now. So just even, it helps cover those stuff. And then we'll be on as and when we can to provide you with some light entertainment. And of course, to talk our truths about Celtic and not be going just with whatever the popular narrative is. We'll be going with our honest narrative, as always, on the bus. And with the characters that are on this channel, we don't have much of a choice in that, I would dare say, either. Also, remember as well, hit the subscribe button if you've not already. Hit subscribe, and we will... And hit the bell if you have subscribed, because that means you'll never miss a bus when they are sporadically appearing at the bus stop. Piesports.com, tasty pastry treat, all that. We know the drill by now. Bus 1888 at the checkout. Right, Jonathan, where do we start? The tagline for the show tonight: silence ahead. There's 29-minute silence. That is how it is? I mean, I read over these emails I get sent for the Fans Collective, and I want them to stick at it, of course. There's a lot of writing in it, a lot of reading to get through. So I did think I'd read it right. It's going to be silence for the first 29 minutes. Silence ahead for second placed Celtic. And that's obviously with reference to us standing in the SPFL at present. And of course, speaking of second, it's our second match in the Europa League because we're at home to Braga after a 0-0 draw away against Red Star Belgrade. Now, what does it all mean? Where are we all at with everything right now? I think it's hard to be... I know there's a lot of intertwining things at Celtic when it becomes, the negative feedback from the fans to the owners or the directors can feed onto the pitch because of a lack of transfers, and that can feed negativity because the manager's not happy with a window onto the players, and then that negative energy sort of circles around. Celtic's a bit of a conundrum for me, though, because when the going's been good, we've seen lethargic performances, and then I actually think we played bad at the weekend, Jonathan.
No, I didn't think we played badly at all. It's one of those ones, actually, probably one of our better performances in the league this season, and you saw it coming away with a 0-0. I don't know how many more 0-0s I can watch, Russell. There's been so many 0-0s.
I know.
It's been torturous. Just give us a goal.
What do you make of that? I mean, did I read right that Hearts... I'll just double check it now, actually. 2 seconds.
There's 4 or 5 teams that score more goals than us in the league this year. So Livingston are one of them.
Really?
Livingston, Hearts, I think it might be.
Yeah, right now Hearts are basically Hearts have scored double the amount of goals than what we have. And I find that really, really hard to sort of understand when... I find it easier to understand with the backdrop that's going on if the performances lack a bit and there's the negative energy, as I say, and it feeds onto the players and the team. And then I look at the performance Saturday and I think, fucking hell, that could have been a performance from peak Brendan eras. And if we drew it 0-0, we'd be like, oh, it's fine. We're doing everything that we want the club to do, or the team to do, I should say, correctly. It's just not happening. But right now, everything's getting... everything's getting sort of intertwined. You know what I mean?
All under the microscope, isn't it? It's all under the microscope at the minute. There's always going to be a little bit of ready to be a bit negative, given everything else that's going on at the club just now. It's maybe translating slightly into the football, but as I say, I didn't think we were bad at the weekend by any stretch of the imagination. But any poor result, I think now people are going to seize on it as another axe to grind against this board. So, you know, it won't take much for people to turn that haven't already.
No, I get that, mate. No, I totally get that. Damien Gallagher's came in. Great to have you on the bus, mate. And he says, shady what, boys? Are you looking for a seat on the board? I think Damien must be new to the channel. I think if there was ever any
one or the other,
any podcaster like ever in the Celtic sphere that could be asked if they want a seat on the board, I'd be the last one. I think it'd be pretty fair to say. I think, yeah, I don't know if Damien's
that green room you're in is the only green room you'll be getting invited to. Put it that way. They won't be having you in Celtic Park's lobbies.
I don't know if it was maybe because I said there was a lot of reading in the email. That's the only thing I can think of. But anyway, nice to have you on, Damien, and I hope you enjoyed the show. Jonathan, with regards to Brendan right now, Brendan's overseen at the end of the day, mate. 2 out of these 6 games this season in the SPFL have been drawn. That's not a ratio that can be carried on throughout. He's got a point from one game in the Europa League, but he's in the Europa League because he had 2 0-0s against Kairat Almaty and lost his second penalty shootout in a row at Celtic, which falls back to, of course, the Aberdeen Scottish Cup final. Now, is Brendan getting enough of a tune out of this team? Or is it fair to say that with everything going on right now, that he's got, and everything that he's achieved, by the way, and you know, I'm a massive Brendan Rodgers fan, is he getting scrutinised as much by the support as what he should be right now? Or is it very much because now everyone's got their eyes on the board that he's maybe either getting slightly overlooked for as much criticism he should get, or is it perhaps there's a real understanding or certainly a thought process that this is, as I say, all correlated, and the reason Rodgers can't get the same tune out of Celtic right now is because of a dismal transfer window. Players came in too late, a really sluggish start that he's now trying to pick up the pieces of that was due to the fact the recruitment was so poor.
Well, I think there's elements of truth to both sides of it. Certainly, we've been over the window enough, and the backdrop with the fans probably doesn't help the team either in a lot of respects. But on the other hand, you do have to look at Rodgers and think, is there ways he could tweak this and do something a bit different? Because he is renowned and certainly has been renowned for being able to make tactical changes in games to find ways to win them. And at the minute this season, he's not really doing that, nor does he seem to be getting the best out of a number of players. You can't put it all on him, of course. There is certain players that, you know, for example, Maeda is probably the obvious one, wanted to move on, and there's only so much the manager can do there. But there's probably an argument, for me anyway, if I'm just going to focus on him for a minute, that you actually potentially drop him and take him out of the equation altogether. The problem he's got there is who do you replace him with, because they just don't have enough depth, really, without having to shoehorn somebody out of position potentially to actually manage that. We know how weak we are on the right-hand side in particular, and it's very challenging for Rodgers. What I would say as well is that there's there's always a big frustration over the 0-0s, and I get that. I'm one of the ones that has seen enough. I mean, if I don't see another 0-0 this season, I'd be delighted. But you're looking at it, and you've got to say that with the way things have panned out under a different manager, this could be so much worse. This could be so much worse. You know, with so much going wrong at boardroom level now, that's spilling over into attendances, silent protests at the ground. Everything at Celtic Park just now feels out of sync. And it takes a very talented individual as a manager to be able to manage through that and still be picking up points. This, for example, if I was to go and say we had somebody like a Lenny in charge right now, I think the whole thing would implode. because I don't think he'd be able to manage everything else that was going on around the football club just now. I'm just using him as an example. But there'll be so many managers like him that could end up in that sort of situation. Whereas I think Rodgers is a lot more cool, a lot more calm, a lot more collected, and probably better at shielding the players in some respects from that. But ultimately, he's going to be faced with questions, Russell. If these performances don't start improving over the next few weeks, whether that's right, wrong, or indifferent, there's going to be a moment in time where the fans are going to start asking questions if we're still struggling to get results, particularly domestically, and struggling to score goals, again, particularly domestically. At what point, I guess I'd ask the question to you, do the fans begin to start questioning the manager and his decision making in terms of the players? And does that then also mean, in a perverse way, the board would also be getting what they wish for, in the sense that if we're looking longer term, it's unlikely they're going to keep Brendan Rodgers on, to put it mildly. How do you see all that playing out?
Well, I think you've got comments like this from Chris that comes in, and he is one of the hundreds of thousands of Celtic fans out there watching, and his opinion is right now that Brendan's stifling flair, creativity and expression within that style of play. And on that note, I mean, I think my frustration, if you're asking me about it, would be I find these team selections baffling at times right now. And I don't think that's anything to do with the backdrop that's going on right now. I know in the past, Brendan has definitely played the fiddle of, oh, well, when you don't get backed, that's the only option I've got is to play a player out of position. We remember with Cal McGregor left back at Ibrox. Was that Lenny? Was that Lenny?
No, Rodgers did it in the game they lost 1-0. Rodgers did it twice. Lenny followed suit and done it in a different game.
He did it. Yes, right, good. I'm glad I'm right on that. But I think in this instance at times there's been a lack of consistency of decisions that have made most sense. We don't quite know what he's basing everything on. Ingles, for most, was starting too many games last year for a young player. He certainly had a great run at Christmas time. I certainly think he was a key component in our Champions League successes. I think that, he only signed one player permanently from the 9 in a row, if you remember that way, of his first transfer window. And that was Bernardo he actually retained and bought permanently. His record signing is Ingles, and yet they're bombed, mate, as far as I'm concerned, in general, from being first-team regulars at Celtic, it seems, this year. We've seen other surprising decisions, shall we say, in terms of selection as well, this campaign. And I think Rodgers is getting away with it a wee bit because of the situation right now. I think there is an acknowledgement as well, though, that if you were Team Brendan, who was, by the way, a spokesman for All Matters Celtic the whole summer, right? Whilst not able to fight his own corner because he wants to bring diplomacy this time and be democratic more in public than he was first time around when all this shit, exact same shit happened, and has always been happening, by the way. I think within that, there's been an element of sympathy for him having to juggle all those matters and the board being silent. I personally think he should have tied these flags to the mast. 10 times stronger in his views. I think he should have done. I would have, but I can only compare it to how my own mind works. And for me, it would have been the Terminado Road all over again. I'd have done all those sort of quips, and I think that would actually be knowing your audience and reading the room a wee bit better, because I think the fans looking for that this time. So even though he's trying to be diplomatic because of what the fans' reaction was last time when he left, I think they had short-term memories. This time the fans are all in and getting rid of that board. He would have retained the backing of the support if he were to be a wee bit stronger or had a bit more courage with his convictions in what he was saying. He tried to juggle it. He tried to say everything to everyone. And right now he's getting a free pass for the fact that we know he wasn't happy. But because of his wishy-washy, it wasn't wishy-washy, he was trying to be as democratic as he could. He was spinning too many plates to keep too many people happy, saying everything to everyone, as I say. And I think that gives him a shorter allowance of patience than what he would have got had he went all out in the Terminado Road. I think the fans would 100% if we had the exact same run of form, be slightly slower on the uptake of critiquing his team's display so far this season. But none of that. Take all that away, and that hypothetical example I give, and nothing changes the fact then we still come back to it, the team's performances. They haven't been good enough. It's that simple. And that can be a million types of there could be a million reasons off the field why that happens, but the manager's job at the end of the day, I mean, we absolutely empathise, as I say, with having to be Celtic spokesman all year, all summer, I should say. But your nitty-gritty of your job, mate, is to get the best team from what you've got out in the park in the best possible formation to win that game, to make the right substitutions at the right time. And right now we're watching the same tactics that we always see. It's just regressed a little bit. I think the personnel's regressed, yes. But the actual team performance level has done so also, and he's not done anything to change that. And then when you're watching more pedestrian performances again, he is accused of, the horseshoe passing round the back, and this is all just like before. That's a wee bit. Those voices aren't, in full voice right now because of the bold stuff, but they'll grow. I think Rodgers has to. I think he has to put his foot on the gas at some point with the team right now. Start doing things. Start fighting fire with fire like you didn't do with your pressers. And I knew this would come back and bite him. When you try to say everything to everyone, there is always going to be examples then that you give that fall either side of the debate, whatever way you're on of it, that you can use against them. Yeah? I think the performances that he's putting in match his demeanour all summer, which is trying to just to play it safe. The team's playing within itself right now, and Rodgers was playing it safe with the pressers. I think he should have fought fire with fire in the summer at the pressers, and I think the team needs to start fighting fire with fire soon, and he needs to start getting to be more aggressive. We can't have Tenecti being your only player who gets the ball and doesn't seem to be following the team protocol. My worry is that'll get some sort of almost drained out of him.
I mean, utilised over time, though, won't it?
Yeah, neutered over time. That's a great way of putting it.
Yeah, because the opposition teams will clock on. If our biggest threat is going to be Tenecki, and that's the only threat, more alarmingly, that we seem to be offering at the minute. Eventually, teams will suss out a way to stifle him in matches, and when that happens, then where do we turn for inspiration and creativity and goal threats? And you wouldn't be looking at that team and thinking there's a lot of those options in there just now. And that is solely, partly down to the window. And then there is an element of, is Rodgers picking the best teams? You touch upon the midfield, you touch upon guys like Bernardo and Engels who can't get a look in, but, they were expensive players, and they have proven in their time that they have been good players for Celtic. No question about it. When they have played, there have been games in there, particularly I felt Engels in the Champions League last year certainly had some very strong performances in there, but now they don't seem to be getting much of a look in whatsoever. He's also got a conundrum to try and work out, as I keep going on about, is this right wing. I don't know what he does on that side, to be honest, because he seems to be very much lacking in options. It seems like he's either going to have to play Maeda out there out of position. He's either going to have to persevere and hope James Forrest can hit a bit of form. So that's definitely his best natural right winger by a country mile for me that he's got. Or he's going to have to move somebody else out into that wide role, like Bustalgia, or even possibly looking at moving Tenecki over and see what he can do on the right to see if we get more joy with Bustalgia on the left. But he's going to need to look at that. I think there's elements there of players that are just, it's a bit stale. If I'm looking at it, there's probably, we're at the end of a cycle of players in some respects at Celtic, regardless of what else is going on in the window and the backdrop with the fans. There was probably a cycle of players that have been here for as many years as they needed to be, have done everything that they would have probably set out to achieve by coming to Celtic, got no affiliation with the club, and are probably ready for a new challenge. And unfortunately, I think we've got a few of them that have not been able to get moved on because of the failings of the summer window. And I'm not just talking about Mike, I think there's more than just him in there. That means we're now in a situation where we've got players that already have, in my opinion, potentially got their eyes on playing somewhere else. And certainly when it comes to what Celtic can offer, they maybe feel that they've gone as far as they can in their careers at Celtic. And that's what you normally find with very successful teams, and the teams that tend to consistently win trophies year after year and win league titles year after year, is there needs to be a natural sort of progression in terms of replacing players so that it's still fresh. And Rogers talked about that, Russell, going right back in his very first interview when he came back, about how it only works when you're dealing with fresh players, how it couldn't work if he had the same players he had the first time around, if he had them the second time, because the ideas and the tactics and everything else would all gone a bit stale, as you'd expect if you're playing the same way with the same players for a number of years. There needs that freshness there. And he's not going to get that now in the window. The window's been and gone. So what he now needs to do is try and find a way to get the best out of what he has. And to me, that means he needs to try something different. Yes, he definitely could do with taking a break from playing the ball around the back and trying this patient build up, because we've seen it for so long, and teams have got wise to it, and it's not entertaining to watch. And there's a lot of critics of Rogers that
Celtic need to start being the ones that apply the pressure, Jonathan. I did
do.
think again, though, there was more signs of that, ironically, on Saturday. There has been in many games this season, albeit it was a 0-0 draw. I'm not saying it was a vintage performance or anything, but I did feel there was more impetus to our play than we've seen in many examples this year. Would that be fair?
Yeah, I would say so. So again, you're looking at it, and potentially that might be a building block, and we end up pushing on. But just there was the case that the result didn't go our way, and that can happen, of course, at any point. But you'll need to make sure that that continues, and I'll be interested to see exactly how that plays out tomorrow against Braga, when you're playing a team that's going to be more upper level, certainly from Hibernian anyway. You're certainly going to be playing a team more at your own level when you're playing a Braga. And they'll certainly, I would imagine, come to Celtic Park not fearing us with the sort of summer we've had, and the fact that the ground will be half empty, and particularly given the kick-off time alongside the protest. And I think that the Europa League potentially might present opportunities for Rogers to experiment a little bit and see what he can bring into domestic football, because I don't know, Russell, how engaged the fans are in the Europa League. I think they will get more engaged the further they go into the tournament, of course, if they want to make strides in it. However, if Celtic were not to make strides in it and go out early, I don't know if the fans would really be as emotionally invested in that, given the fact that there's not as much interest in going to the games, and I understand why. It's obviously plenty of club issues that are causing that problem. I just don't know if the Europa League potentially presents that opportunity for Rodgers to do a bit more experimentation, rather than having to necessarily look at that as these are must-win games. Do you think that is something he might take on board, or do you think for him the Europa League is now the biggest competition there is for him?
Well, I think if I was him, I would certainly be looking at the positives, and that would be that you've got an opportunity, if you really do back yourself, that regardless of unhappy you are with the recruitment, you've got an opportunity with Celtic to more than just break the top 24 barrier. You're looking at win this competition to get top 16, top 8, and then let's see what whereabouts you land in terms of your knockout draws. And by the way, as we know, Brendan's got his own ego to massage. I don't see a problem with that, by the way. I know a lot of people do. I don't. Doesn't bother me at all that he's got that side to him. He wants to be the manager to break the 21-year. It'll be 22 years probably. Yeah, it'll be 22 years by the time it comes around. Knockout match, duck. Of course he wants that. He wants to be that guy as well. I'm going to read out some quotes that he gave, Jonathan, because I've got to be honest with you. I think this is the last time he can sort of recycle this, in my opinion. I know everyone will be different. And by the way, I'm Rodgers. I think I've been Rodgers' biggest advocate, in terms of the fan media stuff. I've absolutely, tied my flag to the mast. I think he is 10 times the football manager that Ange Postecoglou is, and I stand by it. I know he's doing well at Forest just now, but other than that, I think Brendan is a far better manager than Ange Postecoglou. But this pish that I'm reading, the way I'm reading it, and maybe tone is everything, but reading it, I think there's only so many times you can rinse and repeat the same excuse about the recruitment drive, Jonathan, when it comes to displays. So I'll read it out for you. Of course, we're not scoring as many goals as normal, but the team is still showing a really resilient side. Fair enough. We haven't lost this season. Defensively, we're very strong. I mean, we've not lost this season. That is a reach even for you, Brendan. That's spin. We have lost this season. Doesn't matter. It was 2-0 against Kairat. If we lost a penalty shootout, we didn't make the Champions League. We've got a defeat on our record this year. End of story. Do not start spinning. We've not lost this year. You don't need to be a rocket scientist to understand where and why we haven't got the goals, because a manager can always transform a team. Do it then. But the trajectory of a team will always come down to the level of players that you have. That has not changed in football. It's not rocket science, he says again. It was the same way back years ago as to what it is now. The players ultimately will transform the trajectory of your football. So for us, we've brought some new players in. We give them time to settle in. Once we've done that, we support them and the players that are here. We'll continue to work with them and look to push the levels as we go through the season. Now, I'll tell you why it's very dangerous, Jonathan, and I want your thoughts on those quotes as well. In fact, I'll bring them up on the screen. In fact, that might make life a wee bit easier for you, mate, so you've got a wee point of reference as well. But I tell you why that runs out, because you're going to lose the players that you've got. And I think that's something that he shouldn't be getting lost on him. There's only so many times you can say, like, well, the players I've got aren't really good enough. Try my best to make them a bit better, get them through the levels. It's not rocket scientists why we can't score goals. You've just brought in a guy that you paid 30 million quid for at Leicester, and at 28 years old. You've got a guy that, and kudos to you for it, has brought out the best in Diaz Almeida, who got 37 goals last year in your ranks. It's not doom and gloom in terms of what options you've got available for you in the attacking phase. I get that there's other slight issues that Iñárritu might not be completely up to pace as of yet, albeit, does that justify missing the chance off the bar at the weekend? I don't think so. And it's up to you to get the best out of Maida now you've kept in the team. I've never heard of a narrative where managers are, it's a shame we never sold him. Usually it's we've got to keep our best players, no matter what. So there's a bit of spin going on there as well. Jonathan, where do you stand with the quotes that we've sort of just covered there?
It all kind of sounds very, very similar to what he's been kind of plowing the same lines, hasn't he, for the last few weeks? He always kind of just goes on talking about how it's early in the season, how he's looking to build and all of this, and it does seem a little bit like he's still kind of keeping the excuses close to his chest in terms of the recruitment side of things, and it's obviously a line he's been given by the board because of their ineptitude in the window. But there's only so many times you can play that card by the same token, because ultimately it's not Peter Lawwell and company that pick the starting 11 for the games. That is Brendan Rodgers' job, and he needs to look at his team and determine which one of these players is actually going to do a job for him. And if he's, hinting that he'd have been better off selling the likes of a Dyson Maeda, and then that then suggests to me that Rodgers doesn't think he can do a job anymore for Celtic. It certainly shouldn't be something he's saying publicly, but it also does suggest then, why would you pick him if you don't think he's ready and able to do a job for you?
Jonathan, is there a hint of condescendingness? I know that's not a word, but we're using it anyway. we'll continue to work with them and look to push the levels as we go through the season.
Yeah, again, I kind of feel that's kind of similar sort of comments to what he says every year at this time of year, or any actual time where they're having a few poor results, but particularly at the start of the season, I always kind of feel it's almost like a soundbite that Rodgers comes out with almost all the time at this point of the year, particularly after a poor result, is that he's got the whole season to get the players up to speed. He's obviously going to be kind of mentioning it a lot more this time around because he's pretty much saying the team he's got isn't good enough. it's exactly what he's saying there between the lines. Is that his team that he's got isn't good enough, and that he's now having to try and work with what he's got to try and turn them into something that could be good enough further down the line. But even then, I don't think he necessarily believes that. I think there'd be plenty of players there he would rather shift and bring new ones in, even when we get to January. As I say though, what he has to work with is how he gets the best out of the players from now until then, because he's maybe got a bit of a get out of jail free domestically in the sense that Rangers are completely all over the place, but Hearts don't seem to be. I don't think they'll necessarily keep that up, but Hearts don't seem to be messing around at the start of this season. If they were to win on Saturday, then they have a 5 point cushion over us going into the Sunday game against Motherwell, which again, I believe, has another protest in that one as well. You suddenly drop points there, and Hearts have a little bit of a cushion at the top of that table, and that'll just add to the unrest amongst the fans because we expect to be top of that league. It's where we've been for so many years now. That we kind of expect to be there, pretty much from day one of a season right through to the end. So that could be interesting how that all plays out in terms of the competition in the league this year. And I would turn around and say there is an opportunity for one of those teams that are outside of Glasgow to potentially mount a bit more of a challenge, given the fact that things are very difficult at Celtic and indeed Rangers so far this season. And I just wonder if perhaps the reason he's not necessarily getting the best is there a bit of complacency creeping in, do you think, Russell, because of the fact we've opened up such a big points differential on Rangers? Most people won't expect Hearts to keep up this form. I know they've had a good start, and as I say, they could have a 5 point cushion come Saturday night. But I wouldn't expect them to keep that run going forever. It's much like Aberdeen for me at the start of last season when they put together that run of results, and then eventually the wheels came off and nobody's seen them again near the top of the table for the rest of the season. But does that then mean Rodgers feels he's got a little bit more leeway domestically because he doesn't feel there's any real challenge there?
Well, I look at it slightly differently. I think that we should be grateful for the challenge that Hearts are putting up, because you spoke earlier about the appetite for the Europa League, whether it's there with the fans, whether it's not, and if results go away, then the appetite will build naturally. If we do what Celtic do in Europe and is underperform, go out with a whimper, then there's no appetite that exists anymore because we'll be out of it. Then you'd fall back to the league. And if there's no Hearts challenge and you're 15 clear of Rangers, guess what then goes? The appetite for Saturday afternoons. Now, that might actually be a recipe that would work in many aspects for the message that's wanting to be sent to the board. And I think that's the tough one to sort of balance out. But I think generally for any ambitions people have, I don't think it's there's a chance in hell, and I said this for a long time, way before any of this silent protest stuff or fans collective stuff happened. I said Rodgers is here for 3 years. He's very clever with his words, and he kept saying I said I'd be here for 3 years. I'm now 200% here for 3 years. He's literally confirming to you I'm here for just 3 years. Listen to his words. He's never said I'm here for a minimum, 200% here, a minimum 3 years. I'm here for 200% here for 3 years. He's telling you he's here for 3. But if you did have any hope of keeping him, then half empty ground, so we've got a 15, 20 point lead at fucking Christmas time, ain't going to entice him to stay either. What it would do though is tell you what, doing this channel would be hard fucking work anyway. where the motivation would come from. You'd be really going back to the Ronnie Dyler season, second season, where all hope is but gone as to what the direction is. And see, to be honest with you, I think we're seeing cycles at Celtic where I think there's very much reminiscence of Rodgers' third season reminded you of Ronnie's second season. Rodgers' third season again reminds you of Ronnie's second season and Rodgers' third season the first time around. It's so hard because I think to get what we inevitably want, a pound of flesh, if you like, Jonathan, is going to have to be given somewhere along the line.
Yeah.
And it's what we're willing to part with, or what part of our flesh, what organ it is that we're willing to give up that might get us what we want in the long run. This is not going to be something that we just get to keep winning, keep a sold out stadium, and get rid of the board at the same time. There will have to be compromise in there, and it will come in the football department in terms of results, or it being that bad that we stop going, not winning a league title, out the 2 cups, out of Europe in the Europa League before it even breaks up. You know what I mean? In the 32, finishing that bottom 8, Jonathan, in 32. Yeah. One of these are going to have to happen for us to get what we want, I think, because it gives you a visual on the park, a point of reference on the park that you can then use to back up your argument that this isn't working. But if everything keeps working technically, and I know the Champions League, unfortunately, is a strong enough argument. Otherwise, they'd have gone by now. So we're going to need to give up something that's fucking a wee bit humiliating. And that's going to come with a league not being won, or a double cup exit. We're already in the semi-final against our rivals. No one wants to lose that. So there's that one out the equation. So you need to exit the Scottish Cup at the third round. And I think you need to, Europa League-wise, be out in the 32 team phase for us to have our sort of examples that are really, really bad to get what we want. And I just can't see anyone being willing to do that. Well, of course, we can't throw games, but I just mean anyone willing to want to watch that either and affect it by, i.e., not going to games in the first place and stuff. It's really hard to juggle this right now. I don't know quite how I'm on to making this example, but when I look at it, Jonathan, it's impossible for the achievable goal to occur without some sort of sacrifice made along the way in terms of being a Celtic fan. And I think that's going to have to come in competitive losses at a level we can't really abide, can't accept, and then gives you the visual, as I say, and the actual point of reference that even the board can't turn their back on.
Yeah, I think you're right. There would need to be a tipping point to get everybody fully on side with getting rid of the board and to have the serious knock-on effect that you'd expect to happen there, and for the board to actually feel like, oh shit, this has actually gone to pieces and something needs to change, and it is perhaps a chance for us to look in the mirror and do something. But you'd be talking a monumental failure on the football part, I think, for that to happen. I think we've already begun to see this board are not going to listen to these silent protests. Whilst I have no problem with supporters wanting to do that the way that they are, then that I just don't think the board will pay any attention to it whatsoever. And then that puts you back in a place where if they're not going to listen to fan actions that are being taken by the club, then you're then in a situation where the only way they may listen is if things get worse on the football side of things. And, that then comes down to what's more important as a Celtics fan. Is it getting rid of this board and sacrificing success? Or is it retaining this board and continuing with the domestic bliss that we've become so accustomed to, and potentially making some inroads in the Europa League, because we are capable of doing that even with an under-strengthened team in that particular competition, of course. So it does become a juggling act, and something has to give there. And it's one that if you were to put that to Celtic fans, it'd be interesting to see what the actual results of a poll like that would produce, because we all want everything here, and there's arguments already the board should have gone years ago. But it's just not how football works. And even to be fair, when teams are unsuccessful in the park, that's no guarantee either that you get changed at boardroom level. You know, you'll have to look across the city to see how many boards they've gone through that have managed to survive for a while.
Yeah, but there you go, though. They're not. I mean, you say that. I've got to push back a wee bit, because in terms of a board longevity, this is an astonishing period of time, Jonathan.
Well, yeah, we are talking over 20 odd years.
This isn't the norm. This is not how it normally works. It's this long. And by the way, any freshening up that they've went through, they've cherry picked and used either family members or promotion from within and changed job titles. I actually don't think that's how it works, to be honest with you. I think that is a wee bit extreme to have went as many years as what they have in situ, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, usually you would find people would step down. But what I'm saying is it doesn't tend to usually come as often from the footballing side of things. And perhaps their argument is because over the course of that 20-year period that they've all been in situ, or most of them have been in situ, Celtic have had pretty much the lion's share of the success domestically, is what they use as their argument. Yeah, domestically, which is what they'll always beat the drum on, is the bread and butter, which of course it is. However, you can't expect. I guess it kind of goes back to looking at it from the football side of things, like I was saying earlier. The football team needs freshened up, so you're going to end up with more players that have got a desire to win, and then more players that have got a desire to be creative. And the same thing is true when you get up to boardroom level, that you have to be injecting in any form of business new people into that boardroom so that you're getting fresh ideas and you're getting different opinions being brought in that maybe not be considered, and you're willing to try different strategies over time, because the world doesn't stand still. However, it does seem as if Celtic do stand still and have been standing still at boardroom level for a number of years, far too many on that front. And that's how they're able to get away with it, only because of the fact that Celtic have had so much domestic success. And as we've talked about previously on this, they have been able to pretty much get a generation of fans now to believe that domestic success is all Celtic are capable of. You know, you just talked about that stat, 22 years since the last time they won a knockout European game. That's a whole generation worth of Celtic supporters that have grown up now, Russell, and never seen Celtic win a knockout tie in European football. So, of course, that generation of fans are just thinking, well, this is just how it is now. This is what Celtic's level is now. And that is how we've now ended up in a situation where, because we've gone stale in the boardroom for so long, it's now came back and bitten us on the arse on the football side of things as well. And ultimately, you need to freshen things up. How do you go about freshening things up with this boardroom? I think it would take, I don't even know if one poor season would be enough. You know, you had the one poor season with COVID, and what changed? Nothing. Nothing changed. I know now that there's also a lot more discontent amongst the supporters at the board than there was back then, and there was a whole heap of mitigating circumstances they could put that season down towards, rather than having to look at their own failings in that particular season, which probably got them a bit of a get out of jail free card. But I think it might take something just as similar, a car crash of a season as that COVID one, under more normal footballing circumstances, for anything to change at boardroom level. I mean, let me put it to you, in terms of the protest and everything they've got going on, which, as I say, the supporters are absolutely right to do. Do you anticipate that there's any form of protest this Celtic support can manage that will have any impact on the board in terms of them paying any attention whatsoever to it? Because I just don't see the board paying attention to any of this.
Well, yeah, we had a comment coming earlier for Damien Gallagher again, who, by the way, was just to let viewers know, was only saying it was shady work because we were 10 minutes late. I like that. He was waiting on the bus patiently. So, Damien, apologies for that at the start. He's saying, how do you think the silent protest is or isn't working? And Jonathan, I take it that's what you're saying. What type of protest would work? I take for what you're saying that you're not convinced the silent protest works.
I don't think it works.
Why do you not? What I mean, in what sense does it not work? I think there's a smugness and aloofness from the board that is built on years of calling supporters bluff when this happens. The COVID season was the year where all hell broke loose with the fans. They did enough of everybody and they flipped the whole narrative because the Celtic board, bear in mind, landed lucky on Ange Postecoglou after failing to get their number one target for 6-month chase in Eddie Howe. They land lucky on Ange Postecoglou. He starts as badly as the COVID season ended, then goes on to win the League Cup against Hibs after going behind, then goes top of the league by December, I want to say, the December.
January. It was the end of January. It was the Rangers game, the 3-0 Rangers game.
So even at the Christmas break, we were still second again. So we could have been 2 years. But by then, the football was good. We'd got a trophy in the bank, and everyone shut up about the board. And they played, of course, their clever sleight of hand and that Peter Lawwell had retired. Now, when you can play a fan base so adamant, so angry, so animated about your removal, and within under 12 months, land upon a manager, still be second in the league, kid on, you've retired the Peter Lawwell, promoted from within who you want into his role, sack the guy within 3 months it came in to be said fresh face. See, when you know you can get everyone to shut the fuck up that easy, mate, and turn their opinion, they'll back themselves to ride this one out. Don't you doubt that. They will back themselves to ride that out. And I have to agree with you. The silent protest thing, I think, is a good starter, because what they're also doing, you need to give the fans collective their due, is they're testing the water with how well and how far the fans themselves, who they need the backing of for this to carry on, and they need to stay strong on it, how far they're willing to go and what levels they're willing to go to get their message across, to get the board to realize. So I think it's a level 1 thing, if you know what I mean, in terms of the silent protest. So I think we have to have it right that whilst it might not be working so well right now, they couldn't just go all in Sharkgate. Do you know what I mean? As I think they could have lost many of supporters of the fan collective movement that they've got. My fear is, of course, that they're going to lose many of them anyway. And time's proven that. We've got the examples that are proving that. It's the guys at the top of that. The guys at the top of that fan collective who've been sort of voted in, or however it's kind of worked, or they've volunteered to do it, and then they sort of came up with a top 15 team. They've got to stay true to this, and they've got to keep pitching ideas. They've got to keep listening to supporters. And I've got no doubt most of them will. I'm not sure all of them will. Had it been my way, and it might come as a surprise for anyone to hear this, but had it been my way, I would have just let the wee fella do it. That might be surprising, but he is the guy who, when you see him in the media, holds the board to account in a way the board won't like, because it's articulate, it's well thought out, it's well measured. He pushes back against, famous ex-footballers that happen to be in the Sky Sports studio at the time when he's getting dialed in. He could hold his own, I think, if he were to be in some sort of meeting with the board. And he's got the ego. And he might not like me at that end, but it's the truth. He's got the ego to want to do it. I sometimes think too many chefs spoil a broth. If it had been me, I would have just said, we need to just get a president of this, if you like. And whether you like the person or not, nonplussed either way. But get behind who you think would be best at getting this message across and sustaining it for a long period of time. And that's where my worry is, that there's going to be a lot of different opinions all coming in, and it means that movements you could do get diluted into maybe, like, for example, right now, silent protests, because it's keeping that part of the 15 happy, that and that other part, sort of satisfied, semi-satisfied, and everyone's got there's that many opinions flying about. I just worry if it's going to be strong enough.
Yeah, it's quite hard, isn't it? Because there's a lot of different groups to consider. They have to have a collective approach all the time, because there's invariably going to be differences of opinion as to how to go about this, and there will be some fans that will want to take more extreme action than others, and everyone will have their own reasons for different approaches that have been put forward as to how best to handle this. And you're probably right that in some ways, if there's somebody that sits at the top to kind of oversee everything, then there is somebody there that can, gauge all the supporters' different opinions through these 15 representatives, and then also be able to kind of make that argument more to the board, and also, be able to kind of try and find the solutions that are going to work, that the fans are going to be able to buy into, to try and enforce change here. And I think that's what it's all going to come down to, is really how the Celtic support want to try and influence this change. And it's a very difficult one. I certainly wouldn't want to be heading up the fans collective in that respect and trying to come up with the solution as to how you best go about trying to enforce change at boardroom level, just given the emotion involved with so many different people towards this board, but also that emotional tie, of course, towards wanting to watch their football club as well. You're put in a pretty difficult situation. A lot of fans here, that the loyalty towards the team almost feels like it's being tested, in the respect that they're now having to do things you would really clearly, obviously everyone would rather not be having to partake in, because the football club hasn't been able to carry out its duties correctly. I mean, going back to what you say, I think that the silent protests do make sense if you're talking about that as a starting point. But then you do have to kind of factor in, and I think this is, if I was to play devil's advocate here, what the board will be factoring in is they can have the silent protests, of course. It's not going to change their stances. But while these silent protests are going on, if the results start picking up in the background domestically, and Celtic start getting a few results in Europe, will that then be enough to sway some of these fans that were perhaps getting involved in the protests from going any further, because they get more taken in, understandably, by the emotion of the sport, and end up feeling more content with how Celtic are at because the results have started? And that's when we try to be cynical towards any particular supporter. It's just the way that the football can go when results are going well. It's harder to always complain, and then you can sometimes feel like you shouldn't be complaining as well. So it's a very tricky one, that, Russell, depending on how quickly they choose to escalate this as well. Because if the results start improving, how much can they escalate this before?
There's that example, and then there's also, you've got to try and capture the moment. So look at it this way. If you play it slowly, safely, just naturally what will happen is it not universally will fizzle out, but in the minds of many, I'm not saying the majority, but the minds of many, and every voice is so important that they're behind the movement, in the minds of many, it will start fizzling out. Do you know what I mean? And once that happens, that starts having a domino effect. But to keep as many on side right now, I could totally empathise with not wanting to go too far, too soon, and go, whoa, this isn't quite what I signed up for. But, like we were saying about Brendan earlier, you can't say everything to everyone at all times. If we think it's change at boardroom level, put your hands up in the air who's all for it. Right now, they've done that. It was a unanimous result on that forum. It's now about trusting the methods that they use to go about trying to achieve it. But boy, oh boy, do they underestimate the resolute, smug, smarmy, but vastly experienced foes that they come up against who have called it supporters' bluffs before and have tools in their locker to use as weapons to guide them in if they need to as well. And people underestimate that bit here, Jonathan. This is the huge bit. It's fan media, groups that have all signed it as collectives. It's fan groups that have signed it as collectives. They have weapons they can use. Or olive branches, if you like, they can use to fucking dilute that argument or negate it very quickly. Firstly, it'll just be, batten down the hatches, bring it on, we go fucking nowhere. They start feeling like they're getting impacted and they're getting, they might be actually onto a stronger opponent from the supporters this time around. They open the hatches and they go, come in. Here's what we've got to offer you. And you could get, let's say it goes to a seat on the board, a fan rep on the board. How do board decisions get made?
Yeah, it's majority decision, isn't it? So,
But what? Say that again. Sorry, did quite catch it.
So majority decision. So let's just bring all the fans on the board. It won't make a difference.
So you get one fan board member. You've got your fan rep on the board. We'll take it as a small win. Might be as far as we'll get. His voice will be silent in that board because he will never be part of the majority decision making because they will all back each other and it will have no odds. Then you've got other options, as I've said on here before. They could offer more media access to the fan media groups that are prevalent in this. I don't mean ourselves. You can't buy us, you know what I mean? Not that anyone would want to. But you worry that we could give an exclusive with a player a week. How does that sound? Well, suddenly your business is fucking cooking. You know what I mean? We could have you, interviewing Brendan before the game, pitch side and stuff when it's home matches, all this sort of shit. They can go to the fan groups, the two big strong ones, and go, let's talk about that Celtic end. These are weapons they've got as olive branches, mate. That's before they even unbatten the hatches. Right now, the hatches are down. La la la, cover your ears. We can't hear you. You're silent anyway. Sound, we'll write this out and you'll do as you're fucking told in the end. If you do keep an eye on us, we might just offer you some fucking serious quid pro quos that might silence it further. And if not, Jonathan, I think there's a issue that when it drags on that long, that, do you know what? We're going to stop negotiating you now because we don't even need to have the hatches down. Your voice just isn't as big as it was a year ago anyway because everyone's got bored of it. So we've ruled it out essentially anyway. But keep going what you're going and we'll see how many are at the Gracie's meeting in a year's time. So it's difficult to balance it. Really difficult to balance it. And I totally see it from their point of view. I think, oh shit, get my wee duster. I totally see it from the point of view that the silent protest is an easy way into it. Easing your way into it and not trying to lose too many fans when you've had such a strong response on the way. And I do actually get it. I really do. But then the flip side is we're going to need to see something that triggers something quick or you might just lose interest altogether.
Yeah, and it's as I say, it goes back to that being a very thankless task for whoever's got to try and organise what the next steps will be there. And you look at this board, and you just don't know what their next moves could be if they were feeling they were under a bit of pressure. And this time around, I agree they'll try and ride it out like they always do. And obviously, football results over the next few months will probably determine just how successful or otherwise that will turn out to be. I would suggest more than this the protest, but the protest will more naturally increase if the results on the park aren't good, because then that's just going to fuel the fires even more for Celtic fans and provide further evidence as to the feelings of this board in the summer if results were to take a further dip going forward. But even if they manage to ride everything out, they still then have a massive problem when they get to the summer next year, because they're then going to be looking for a new manager. They are not going to get a manager anyone close to the name value of a Brendan Rodgers. They then have to wonder how they go about such a replacement, and how much they're willing to really piss the fans off if they've already done it the year before.
Promote within, Sean Maloney,
Well, that's what I was going to say, but you've got,
John
Celtic
Kennedy.
fans will be acutely aware, Russell, by the time we get to May next season that Rodgers is gone. The season ticket renewals will be out, and then you'll really find out just how much of a sticky wicket this board are in, because that will then determine a lot. And don't get me wrong, they'll pull a sneaky one there. The renewals next May, I suspect, will be the quickest turnaround you'll ever see. It'll be long before they decide on a replacement. They will say, trust us and give us your season ticket money over, and we'll bring the deadline forward. They'll pull all the tactics out that they possibly can. But the point is that even if they wanted to try and ride out this initial storm, they've still got a massive one coming their way next summer. And if they're going to try and do the replacement of Brendan Rodgers on the cheap, then they're going to end up with a far bigger backlash, I can imagine, because you've then had a year's worth of potential pent-up frustration that's already bubbling now. We're already seeing the protests. If that's going to keep adding fuel to the fire, and then you end up in a situation where you've replaced a Brendan Rodgers with a Sean Maloney or a John Kennedy, that might be the straw that breaks the camel's back, and that might be the point where you end up having gone through the levels that you were talking about in terms of protest, that maybe not quite Sharkgate, but certainly something of an equivalent could well be on the horizon at Celtic, where you are then beginning to see boycotts, etc., on a more regular basis.
When I said earlier about a sacrificial pound of flesh, footballing terms, of course, that would need to be given for the board to wake up and smell the coffee as to what was going on, or to get a reaction from them. What if they're hedging the bets that they might get their own the other way around? Flip it the other way. Celtic do a deep run in the Europa League. Celtic do win the treble. Celtic do make semi-finals Europa League. They've only strengthened their own hand, mate. What fickle fans we've got that won't come back to that. And by the way, they know there's how long have you been on the waiting list for a season ticket?
4 years.
How many do you estimate is on the season ticket waiting list?
It's no longer open, and I think the rumours were it was about 20,000 is where they had to stop it.
So you can't even you couldn't even be on the waiting list.
Like, if you wanted to join the waiting list now, you couldn't do that.
But if you're on the waiting list, you remain on it.
Yep, you remain
on it. And the rumoured figure of that stopping was at 20,000.
Yes.
So you would hedge your bets. That'd be a third of the fan base. So a third of the fan base, or let's say even nearly half the season ticket holders, give up their season ticket, which would be an extraordinary amount, right, to give up the season ticket. They don't think that many will do it. And I get that. There's so much history there. They would still have enough to take those places, essentially.
Yeah, potentially.
They'd be looking potentially, Jonathan, at the worst case scenario, 40,000 season ticket holders instead of 52. That would be the sort of sums. Jonathan, they ride this battle out, mate. It's unless a proper tactical move can happen. And like I say, I think that's where you need strong leadership. You need people who can hold a conversation. And you need someone who can, or some sort of message sent that makes it difficult for them. And I think that comes from the football park, unfortunately, being somewhere we're going to need to lose out. I've got a horrible, amazing feeling Celtic might just end up this year with 3 trophies, first knockout win in 21 years. That monkey's off the back with regards to that, and they're both finishing the season in as strong a position as possible. I hope I'm wrong. I'm all for the fans' collective thing that's happening. We played devil's advocate in the bus, and we just basically are trying to establish from both sides how each camp must be feeling right now, how confident they must be feeling. And as I said many a time, but empathising massively with how difficult a job the fans collective have in terms of what they can offer as a means to trigger that reaction for the board that initiates the first white flag from them. And I think that's whilst maintaining the backing and support that you've currently got. And I think that is extremely difficult. I don't envy the 15 that are on there. And we wish them the best of luck with it. Jonathan, quick look ahead to tomorrow. Interesting one. Braga at home. Let's be honest, the Champions League draw, Braga at home, got to win it.
Yeah.
Does it carry the same simplicity though when you see it as a Europa League draw? How mad is that? Your head doesn't quite go the same way, does it?
It's one of those ones where I think you'd be quite confident of a win if Celtic were a united front, even if you were in the Europa League. If we'd given ourselves every chance and we'd fallen short in the Champions League qualifying, and you were playing Braga at home, I think it would be a lot more people looking at that and thinking this is winnable, given what's going on around the club and the fact Celtic Park will be nowhere near full. I feel like the Europa League could be a bit of a pick and mix in terms of results this season. You might find that you get a couple of surprise ones away from home, but ultimately I also think you might see a couple of surprise dropping of points, shall we say, at Celtic Park. Braga will be a very tidy team. I think they'll try and come and play football, which might suit us a bit more, because what we're really struggling against is these teams that are playing the low blocks and making it difficult for us to break them down. That seems to be our Achilles heel so far this season, whereas I think Braga, being that sort of technical side from Portugal, we'll play a bit, we'll try and be creative, we'll try and get on the front foot, and hopefully that means we'll get a bit more of an entertaining game to watch ultimately. And even going back to it, I also think that for Rodgers, even though I was saying earlier he might look at these games as being experimental, I think he'll want to win them. I think Europe is still very much in his front line.
How do you see it?
I think we'll win. I think we will win. I think they'll find a way. It won't be comfortable, but I think they'll find a way to win, possibly 2-1. I actually thought even Europa League last week, I actually thought Celtic weren't bad in that game at all. I remember texting you while it was on and saying I didn't think we'd lose after about half an hour of the game. And they very nearly could have won what would have been a very difficult away fixture on paper. A game that could have been a Champions League tie quite easily, because both clubs.
Can I just confirm? I never seen that text. I don't know what he's talking about, but
yeah, but that could have been a Champions League tie, because both of those teams lost matches they should have won in qualifying. So you've got to give credit where it's due there in terms of that result. And for me, Rodgers still wants to scratch that itch in Europe. And as I say, it could well turn out that come the end of the season, you're looking at it and thinking, you know what, the Champions League was a bit shit, but we've ended up making a real good fist of it in the Europa League, and that's what Rodgers is ultimately going to want to do. He wants a European legacy, and if he can go far in the Europa League, that might just be what he is remembered for when it comes to European football.
Well, we all know he would love that, and we need him to be as motivated as ever right now if we are going to get. I happen to think it'll be a bland draw again, mate. I'm sorry to say. I think it's just where we're going right now. I think it'll be a 1-1. I predict. I actually think they'll go behind as well. I think they'll go behind during the 29-minute silence. That's not me trying to stir the pot. I just think that'll be what catches us out in that period. I think once the fans start, which shows how important they are, I think then you'll see us gain momentum. Probably be a wee bit begrudged that we don't win the game because we create enough chances, but we only score the one goal, because right now we're actually converting the chances that we're not creating enough of, but actually converting even those is our biggest Achilles heel. I think it'll be 1-1 tomorrow, and 2 games, 2 draws. We're starting to just tick off the matches in the tally card and see where we are in the group stage, and everything just starts getting a wee bit trickier. That's how I see it. But notwithstanding that, I'm not ruling out a successful navigation of the Europa League. But I think there's going to be peaks and troughs throughout it this time around. I really do.
Yeah, I agree. I think there'll definitely be a few surprise results as we go along in the Europa League. I think there's one thing about it. Every game that we play in this is potentially winnable. by the same token, nothing would surprise me with how Celtic have gone about their business so far this season if there wasn't to be a couple of upsets potentially along the way that we don't see coming and we're on the wrong end of either. I expect there'll be a bit helter-skelter this campaign. And we take stock where we are in January, of course. Hopefully we're still in a good position in that. And then all eyes, again, return to the board and see if they're actually going to willing to learn from the mistakes of the summer.
Well, all eyes are always on the board when it comes to the Bhoycie Bus, as you know. But yes, thanks for everyone who's joined us. I will be hopefully going on live with Mark. I've got cheer there. Hopefully going on live with the judge Mark for the first time in 3 weeks tomorrow. I appreciate the game is an earlier kickoff, so it'd be likely that it'd be like a sort of 5 o'clock show, maybe for 40 minutes, something like that, before he gets settled into his jammies and watches the game from the house, as will I be from here, not in my jammies, of course. But yeah, we will see. Hopefully it'll be me and Mark then, and then I might do one after the show as well. You never know. Hopefully reflecting on what will be a Celtic win. I'm not as convinced as I would like to be, but you never know. It could well be. Jonathan, really enjoyed your company on the bus tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. And thanks to everyone who's been watching, all the comments. It is what makes the show. We'll get the fuck out here. Enjoy your night, and hopefully we'll see you tomorrow. See you later.